An old man named Henri lived alone in Paris. A girl named Constance lived in a town a bit away from Paris and was attempting her driving test for the 5th time. However, she was once again struggling to pass. She helped her father at his workplace, but she longed to move to Paris, far from the shop. Her father wasn't pleased about her decision. Constance began searching for a place to live in Paris and, during her search, came across Henri, who was acting oddly due to his age. His son had decided to rent out a room in the house, but Henri didn't want any tenants. Constance noticed a piano in the home, which no one was permitted to play. She liked the house, but she found Henri to be impolite and sensed that he didn't want her as a tenant. He began coming up with reasons to reject her. After leaving Henri's house, Constance continued her search elsewhere. She was involved in an affair with a married man named Arthur. One day, while spending time with him, she learned that she had been approved for a room in Henri's house. Her dream of living in Paris was coming true, but she was disheartened because Arthur seemed indifferent about her leaving. A few days later, after bidding farewell to her mother and brother, Constance departed for Paris. Upon arriving at Henri's home, she was handed a booklet containing the rules of the house. The first rule was that no one was allowed to wear Henri's slippers. That night, Constance discovered that Henri did not get along with his daughter-in-law, Valerie. He told Constance directly that Valerie was an unstable woman who wanted to place him in a nursing home. One day, while sitting alone, Constance thought about playing the piano. She had learned to play as a child but had stopped over time. Henri didn't approve of her playing the piano and initially asked her to leave the house. Somehow, Constance managed to persuade him to let her stay, but she didn't have enough money to cover the rent. After thinking it over, Henri said he didn't want any money. Instead, in exchange for living in the house, he asked Constance to do him a favor: help break up Paul's marriage and make Paul fall in love with her. Constance didn't want to get involved in such a scheme, but Henri promised to forgive 6 months' worth of rent if she agreed. As she stepped outside, she noticed a bar hiring a waitress. She told a boy named Matthew that she needed the job, and she was hired immediately. The next morning, Henri's son Paul came to meet Constance. Paul knew that his father often spoke poorly of him. He had brought medicine for Henri and wanted Constance to take care of him, as his health was deteriorating with age. When Henri returned home, he mocked Paul, prompting him to leave. Henri, however, was pleased that Constance had begun trying to get closer to Paul. Constance began working at the bar the following day. She also resumed her studies and made efforts to build a friendly relationship with Henri, though she struggled academically and was anxious. Henri had invited Paul over for dinner, and Constance prepared food to impress him. When Paul and Valerie arrived, Constance understood why Henri disliked her. Valerie truly was cunning. That made it easier for Constance to follow through with Henri's plan. She began flirting with Paul and tried to get emotionally close to him. Their conversations lifted Paul's spirits. Eventually, they spoke about the piano in Henri's house. It had belonged to Henri's late wife, and he refused to sell it or let anyone play it. This caused tension between Henri and Paul. During one argument, Henri asked Constance to play something. Upon hearing her music, Henri began to cry. Valerie assumed he disliked the tune, but Paul knew it reminded Henri of his wife. The next day, Constance received her college results and learned she had failed again. Distraught, she cried and returned home, trying to distract herself but sinking into despair, feeling hopeless about her future. Some days later, Valerie came to Henri's house to collect some utensils. Constance, who was unwell, accidentally vomited on them. She began crying in front of Henri and Valerie, speaking of her bad luck. She couldn't return home, as she didn't want to work at her father's shop. Henri encouraged her to pursue what she truly loved. Constance revealed she enjoyed music and playing the piano, but a schoolteacher had made her give it up, and her father never supported her passion. At Henri and Valerie's urging, she sang a song she had written. Henri praised her for the first time. Curious about Henri's wife, Constance learned she had died by falling out of a window 30 years ago. Henri had lived alone ever since. When Valerie joked that Constance liked Paul, she attempted to speak to Henri about it. Henri believed Valerie had only been with Paul for financial reasons, but Constance knew Valerie genuinely loved him. Constance refused to continue Henry's manipulative scheme and said she would leave the house. The next day, she returned to her hometown, only to discover her room had been converted into an office. As a result, she lied to her parents, claiming she had passed her exams and needed to return to Paris immediately. That night, she went back to Henry's house. In her desperation, she agreed to entertain Paul and proceed with Henry's plan. She began asking Henri more about Paul. Despite her shattered dreams, Henri tried enrolling her in a music school. A few days later, Constance began following Paul and started drawing him toward her. After asking Henri about Paul's preferences and habits, she began using that information, making it seem as though they shared the same interests. Paul was unaware that it was all an act, and gradually, he began to develop feelings for Constance. Eventually, Constance confessed that she wanted to begin a relationship with Paul. However, due to their age gap, Paul declined. Constance began to loathe herself for being part of this deception, but Henri reminded her that once Paul fell in love with her, she was to stop everything. Her only goal was to end Paul's marriage. A few days later, Matthew expressed to Constance that he wanted to go on tour with her. But Constance was more focused on a DJ named Simon, ignoring Matthew's feelings. Seeing this, Matthew distanced himself from her. Meanwhile, Constance's involvement with Simon began. Just then, Paul admitted that he had started developing feelings for her and wanted to begin a relationship. Now Paul was pursuing Constance. He accompanied her to the club where Matthew worked as a DJ. There, Constance realized that Simon had forgotten about her. On the way home, Constance confided that her life felt bleak, but Paul's presence made her feel better. That night, Paul was content, believing he had finally found someone special in Constance. Paul didn't return home that night, which made Valerie suspicious. She eventually realized Paul was being unfaithful and even found evidence. Henry's plan had succeeded. Valerie left the house. Yet, even after 2 days, Paul hadn't contacted Constance. One evening, Constance discovered that Henri had applied to the London School of Music on her behalf and had even recommended her to a renowned musician. Later, Paul visited Constance again. She told him that whatever had happened between them should be forgotten, and that she had found someone her own age. Paul was devastated. He had lost both Valerie and Constance. The next day, his lawyer summoned him to court because Valerie had filed for divorce. Everything seemed to be falling apart. That night, Valerie called Paul and informed him she was pregnant. With this news, their marriage seemed salvageable. However, when Paul told Henri, his father showed no joy and began questioning whether Paul should even keep the baby. Paul was hurt by his father's cold reaction and told Henri that when Valerie broke the news to him directly, he'd better react positively, or Paul would cut ties with him completely. Paul shared the pregnancy news with Constance too, adding that he was now happier than he had been in a long time. Constance was content as well, but one day her father found out she had failed her exams and called her back home. When Constance informed Henri, he said that a father should never strip his children of their happiness. Constance responded by pointing out that Henri was doing the same to his own son. At that moment, Henri stopped Constance from drinking and revealed that alcohol had caused his wife's death. She had fallen from a building while intoxicated. The following morning, Constance prepared to return home. That day, Valerie and Paul came to visit. The three of them waited for Henri for several hours, and when he finally came home, Valerie shared the news of her unborn son. Henri pretended to be pleased for Paul, but he struggled to hide his discomfort. As it was time for Constance to leave, Henri gave her some advice: never to wait until old age to pursue her dreams. Inspired by this, Constance stood up to her father and refused to return home. She declared that she wanted to become a musician and would stay in Paris to follow her dreams. At first, her father resisted, but eventually realized Constance had inherited his own stubbornness. In the end, Henry's loneliness faded for good. Constance stayed in the same house for several months, rigorously preparing for her music exam. She composed her own song, and when the time came, she left for London. Henri was confident that Constance would succeed and supported her. just as he had once supported his wife. Upon her arrival at the London School of Music, Constance began her final preparations. The day of the exam arrived, and she managed to pass several rounds. A few weeks later, news of Henry's death reached her. When she returned home, Paul told her that Henri had died happy. He had met his grandson, and Constance had taken a major step toward success. Constance admitted she had failed the final round of the exam. Paul then handed her the keys to Henry's house, as she would need to stay in Paris for a few more months. Along with the house, Paul gave her a final letter from Henri, written especially for her. In the letter, Henri offered his last words of wisdom and mentioned that meeting his grandson had allowed him to let go of all his past resentments. He encouraged Constance never to give up, and with that, she began preparing for her next exam. The film offers a deeply emotional and introspective exploration of human relationships, personal dreams, and the silent battles fought within the walls of a seemingly ordinary home. At its core, it is a story about two people: Constance, a young woman searching for identity and purpose, and Henri, an aging man clinging to control as his life slips into loneliness, whose lives intersect and ultimately change one another forever. Constance represents a generation caught between expectation and ambition. Her repeated failures, strained relationship with her father, and turbulent romantic experiences depict the real struggle of youth trying to break free from predefined roles. Her journey is not simply one of moving to Paris or learning music. It is about claiming ownership of her own voice and future, even when the world continuously tries to silence her. Henri, on the other hand, is a character steeped in regret, bitterness, and grief. His manipulative behavior toward his son Paul and Constance reveals a man afraid of becoming irrelevant, using others as pawns in a desperate attempt to rewrite his past and control what he sees as a failing future. Yet, through Constance's presence, he begins to rediscover empathy, hope, and even joy, culminating in a final gesture of support that redeems his character in the audience's eyes. The subplot involving Paul and Valerie adds another layer to the film's emotional complexity. It delves into themes of broken trust, the fragility of marriage, and the consequences of unresolved familial tensions. Paul's relationship with both women, Valerie and Constance, symbolizes a man torn between duty and desire, emotion and reason. Music, especially the piano, serves as a powerful metaphor throughout the narrative. It represents memory, loss, suppressed dreams, and eventual healing. The piano connects the past with the present and serves as the bridge between Henry's deceased wife and Constance's new beginning. Ultimately, the film speaks to the power of connection. Even temporary relationships can leave lasting impacts. Henri and Constance may have started out as strangers from different worlds, but in the end, their lives became intricately bound. Henri found peace in his final days, not because his plans succeeded, but because he allowed love, imperfect and unexpected, to guide him at last. Constance, despite her setbacks, found the courage to pursue her calling and defy the limitations placed upon her by others. This is not just a story of triumph over adversity. It is a tale of human transformation through vulnerability, forgiveness, and the choice to believe in oneself when no one else does. The film lingers long after its final scene, asking us to reflect on what it means to grow, to let go, and to begin again.